who have distinguished themselves through success and leadership in their professions. These alumni exemplify the values of DWU: lifelong learning, faith, leadership, and service, and serve as inspiring examples to our students. Today's lecture is quite unique. We have Dr. Keith Becker, who is the great-nephew of Gertrude Becker, a 1917 DWU graduate. Dr. Becker is a native of Sioux Falls, and he studied and practiced medicine in Minnesota. Now retired after a 30-year medical career, he and his wife of more than 50 years enjoy traveling, reading, writing, and birdwatching. This morning, Dr. Becker will share stories and reflections from his great-aunt Gertrude's journals, offering a window into her time at Dakota Wesleyan and her extraordinary career as a missionary in India. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Keith Becker.
Well, I want to first thank Kitty for inviting me to give the Opperman lecture. And I realize this is an honor that's bestowed on a Dakota Wesleyan alumni who has had a distinguished, honorable career. And I'm not that person. That person rests in this cardboard box next to me. Her name was Gertrude Becker. She was my grandfather's sister, my great aunt. The box contains 50 years of letters, journals, and photographs of her life. The box had been sitting in my father's closet for years, and when I moved my father into assisted living, I came into possession of the box. I spent a cold Minnesota winter reading through all the letters and journals in this box, and I realized that her amazing life was one that needed to be preserved. I pulled from her diaries and journals her own incredible descriptive words and phrases, compiled them, and brought her back to life in a posthumous autobiography. I'd like to introduce you to Gertrude Ann Becker, my remarkable great aunt and Dakota Wesleyan alumni. So I'll ask you to briefly close your eyes, and when you open them, ignore this young man at the podium and direct your attention to this DWU alumni of 1917, and I'll let her speak for herself.
My name is Gertrude Ann Becker. I was born in Waterloo, Iowa in 1892, the middle child of 9. We moved to Eagan, South Dakota when I was 10, and I always considered Eagan the place of our family roots. We belonged to the Methodist church in town, but we were not a particularly religious family. After graduating from high school, I matriculated at Dakota Wesleyan Teachers School with the intention of becoming an English teacher. I loved my time here. The energy, the studies, my classmates. I joined the Althea Literary Society, and I became the president. I played in the student band, and I worked on the student paper. I was a counselor for the younger girls, and I got pretty good grades. I was on the road to becoming an English teacher. During the summer of 1915, 8 of my classmates and I boarded a train to Estes Park, Colorado, to attend a religious camp. My first time seeing the Rocky Mountains. What an exciting, glorious time it was. For a girl who had never ventured outside the flat boundaries of Iowa and South Dakota, it was like entering a different world. We traveled by Stanley steamer, all of us in one vehicle, me up front the mountains. The road only wide enough for one car, up high to a precipice, looking down on green valleys, dotted here and there with little cottages. We hiked Long's Peak and Sheep's Mountain. Little did I know then that I would one day be hiking the highest mountains in the world. The mountains were where I truly felt the power of God. We returned to our studies at Dakota Wesleyan, renewed in our faith, and ready to continue our studies. Again, I never considered myself particularly religious. However, my life changed one night during my last year. I attended a lecture by a Miss Alice Brethorst. She was a visitor to the campus, having just returned from China, where she was a nurse and a missionary for the Women's Foreign Missionary Society. I believe that God must have directed me to hear her speak. She moved me. She stirred in my heart a spark, a fire I can't explain. Coming away afterwards, I dedicated myself to live for Christ whenever, whatever, wherever He should guide me. I graduated in 1917 with a teaching degree, and I taught for a year in Little Farmer, South Dakota. But I still had the fire inspired inside of me by Alice Brethorst. In 1918, I made the decision that I would set the course for the rest of my life by joining the Women's Foreign Missionary Society. I was sent to Chicago for training, and what an eye-opener that was. The smell, the noise of the stockyards, acres and acres of pens filled with cattle, sheep, pigs. Black clouds filled the sky from the slaughterhouse. Putrid liquid drained from the slaughterhouse into a creek that ran solid brown. I visited Hull House, 13 buildings covering one entire block, clubs, cafeteria, classrooms, gymnasium, kids coming and going, everybody smiling. There was just a good feeling about the place, the opposite of the stockyards. I even saw Jane Addams, but I was too shy to talk with her. Another inspirational woman and a force. During my training in Chicago, I visited orphanages and missions. Growing up in Little Egan, I had never seen so many people of different skin color and ethnic backgrounds. I visited museums, theaters, and Sherman Park, the largest and most beautiful playground in the world. I was seeing a world I had never seen before, but that was the beginning. After my training, I learned I was assigned to the city of Jubalapur, India, and the Johnson Girls Boarding School, where I was to teach English and religion, mentor and guide young Indian girls, and share my faith with women in the surrounding villages. I boarded the city of Benares in January 1920 and departed New York Harbor. How my heart ached as we slipped from port and passed Lady Liberty. I was saying goodbye to family, friends, and all that I knew, to a land where I knew no one and could not speak the language. I was to be a foreigner in a strange land. To say I was a tearful, anxious 28-year-old is an understatement. But I trusted that this is where the Lord wanted me to be. After 6 weeks at sea, we landed at Bombay. What commotion! Porters yelling, crowds, horse-drawn carts, people shouting in languages I couldn't understand. I honestly wanted to cry, get on the boat, and go home. Fortunately, people from the Missionary Society were there, found me, and got me on a train to Jubalapur. For 32 of the next 40 years, India was to be my home. How can I summarize 32 years in India? My first year in Jubalapur, I had monkeys ransack my living quarters, snakes in my bedroom, rats in the rafters of my living quarters. During the years to come, I saw children die of cholera, bubonic plague, typhoid fever, and malaria. I met leaders and statesmen, including Mahatma Gandhi and British governors. I served tea to Vaihe Pundit and her daughters several years before she became the first female president of the United Nations. I was a devoted Christian throughout my life, but I worked with and respected Hindu, Muslims, Sikhs, and Jews. I biked hundreds of miles on my bicycle to surrounding villages, visiting with Indian women, sharing the Gospels. To the young girls at the boarding school, I became their mother, and I loved them all. I spent months in the foothills of the Himalayan mountains where I was sent to learn Hindi. I once spent 15 days hiking 150 miles up to the Pindari Glacier. Visits back home to the States were both happy and sad times. Happy to see my Indian family again. Sadness to leave friends in India. As an elderly Hindu man said during a rainy departure back to the States, even the sky cries when Miss Becker leaves us. But always I would return, and as the years passed, I became to feel more Indian, and that India was my real home. 3 events of my Indian life are the most memorable for me. In 1923, just 3 years after arriving in India, I became the guardian of a 2-year-old girl whose father had abandoned the family and the mother had committed suicide. I brought her back to Johnson School's boarding school, where I and the school raised her. She was given the name Shushila Becker. She became a Christian woman, graduated from the school, and went on to become a nurse. In the Indian tradition, I found a young Christian educated man whose family agreed to a courtship. After a 2-year closely chaperoned courtship, Sushila and Peter were married. It was a happy marriage, and they had 2 children, Sheila and Sam. To them, I was always auntie. The second memorable event involved a 14-year-old girl at our boarding school. Her name was Changai. An older man came to the school claiming that Changai's mother had promised her to him in marriage right before she died. Changai didn't know the man and did not want to go with him. I refused to let the man take her. The man went to the police and they charged me with kidnapping. Changai was allowed to stay at the school while the case dragged on for 9 months. Eventually, the man agreed to drop the charges in exchange for money. Many years later, I was working with a group of young men and women restoring a mission building. One of the young men came up to me and told me his mother knew me and that I had saved her from a marriage. He was one of 6 children, and his mother was Changai. Finally, an event that I could never forget. It was 1943, and I was on the troop transport ship USS Hermitage, departing from Bombay, heading home. Boarding the ship were 600 Polish refugees, 100 of them Polish children from Siberian labor camps. 2 of the young boys, Henry and Walter Bobotek, had been separated from their parents at the onset of the war, and they were on their way to America to reunite with their mother. She was in the US at the onset of the war and was unable to return to Poland. For 2 months, we all traveled to America. I learned their story at the labor camps, and I spent nearly every day with the boys, teaching them English. Once the ship landed in America, the children were not allowed in the United States, but they were housed in a camp in Santa Rosa, Mexico. I learned that their mother was in Chicago, and I went there. I met her, and I told her about her boys. Working through Congressman Francis Case, a classmate of mine at Dakota Wesleyan, and the State Department, we were able to get passports for the boys, and I was in St. Louis when the family was reunited. After a 5-year separation from their mother, what a happy day that was. I stayed in touch with the family, and they became educated in the U.S. and eventually U.S. citizens. I was proud to have played a part in reuniting the boys with their mother. In 1952, I returned to South Dakota, but I continued to work for the Women's Foreign Missionaries Society, traveling around the country, giving talks about the work that we were doing in India. I spent time at girls' summer camps that were run by the Methodist Church. In 1957, I retired from the Missionary Society and I took a teaching job at teaching English at the Flandreau Indian School. It was a boarding school and I got to know the students well. And they dedicated their 1961 yearbook to me. It was the year of my planned retirement, but it was not to be. In March 1961, the Peace Corps was organized. In May of 1962, at the age of 69, I received my acceptance letter into the Peace Corps from Sergeant Shriver. In August of 1962, I was invited to the White House along with 11 other volunteers, all of us over 60 years of age, to have dinner and meet President John F. Kennedy. The Peace Corps assigned me to a high school in Lucknow, India, to teach English, where I taught elementary and high school students. This was not far from where I had spent so many years in Jubalapur, so it was wonderful to reconnect with Sushila and her family and all of my old friends. As the oldest Peace Corps volunteer in India, I was often invited to the home of Kenneth Galbraith, the U.S. ambassador to India, and I got to know him very well. Dr. Houston, who was in charge of the Peace Corps in India, wrote a nice letter to Sergeant Shriver in Washington about me, and I saved it. He wrote, "Miss Becker is one of our prides, a real pet. Not because she is the oldest volunteer in India. None of us think of her as that. But because she is indomitable, indefatigable, and always active and busy in something good. There isn't anyone who is doing more in India." And that made me feel quite proud. These are some of my highlights of my life. There is much more in my autobiography written by me through the hands of my great-nephew. I hope I haven't bored you, and I thank you for inviting me here to share my life with you. My voice has been silent for over 50 years. And I'm quite tired. So I'll bid you goodbye, and I'll return to Hillside Cemetery outside Egan, and I will take my rest next to Mother and Father. If you have any questions, I will let you ask the young man over there. He mostly tells the truth.
Well, you can see Gertrude has not aged too much over the years. She still looks pretty young. This is my daughter, Amanda, who really much carries the spirit of it would be her great-great aunt at this point. But she's very much like her great-great aunt. I don't know if any of you have any questions. I appreciate that you invited us here to present her. I think she was a remarkable woman, and I think she needed to be remembered. So that's kind of why I put her story together. Does anybody want to ask any questions? There's much more that actually I did not include in this talk. And everything that really pretty much in the talk is her own words. I would say that 80% of the autobiography is her words. She was an incredible, prolific writer, and she was very descriptive. And reading her letters and journals, which I've got up here, it floored me how impressive she was. Yes?
So you've published this in a book, and is that out already? Or
well, no, it's not. I have not published in a book. And to be honest, the reason I did this was pretty much for the family members, because so many of us don't remember her. My daughters, my kids, cousins and whatnot, we only have distant memories of her. And so it was kind of a family effort so that the rest of the family would remember her. So I've written it. It's 200 pages, but her writings were so much that it was overwhelming. And to just hang on to this box, no one ever really knew what to do with the box. There was just so much in there. So I tried to take her significant parts of her life and then link them together. But it's mostly 80% is her words. And then I had to sort of edit it and make it make sense.
Keith, if we wanted to read that autobiography, how might we access it?
Well, the box is going to stay here in the archives, all of her stuff here, because the family didn't really know what to do with this. We knew we couldn't just throw it out. There's just too much history here. And so the archives here at Dakota Wesleyan, which is where she graduated from, has agreed to take the archives. And I'm going to leave a copy of what I've written as well. So, anybody else? Yes.
Was she an only child? Did she have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, no, she was one of 9.
One of 9.
Yeah, she was a middle child. She never married. She had, I think, 3 proposals. She broke off one engagement, I think, although she refused to ever talk about it, right after she graduated from Dakota Wesleyan.
What part of India was she stationed?
Jubalapur is kind of right in the center part of India. It was on the plains. It's called the City of Rocks, and so there are these huge rocks that kind of surround the town of Jubalapur. It's not called Jubalapur now. Once India became independent, many of the names were changed, and so obviously Bombay is not Bombay. I think it's Mumbai now, and Jubalapur name was changed. If you do a Google search, it'll give you a different name for it, but it was right in the center part of India.
So I'm guessing it was in the state of Maharashtra. Maharashtra, that's the center.
I think that's right. I think that's correct.
Was this a total surprise to you, or had you heard about her through the years?
You know, my memory of her was just as an old woman. Yeah. What I remember of her is coming to a family reunion and bringing a tub of ice cream. And she always brought back these trinkets from India, which as an 11-year-old boy, I didn't know what to make of. You know, an ivory letter opener that when you're 11 years old, you don't know what to do with that. But she considered her nephews and nieces her children. She always would write letters to them. She always knew when their birthdays were. She considered, and then when she came back, about every 5 or 6 years, she would come back from India, and then she would reconnect with the family. There would be a family reunion, and she would always make a point of getting to know the kids, her nephews and nieces. One of them actually was named after her, and that was one of the reasons. Her 2 aunts are still alive, and I know they remember her very clearly, and so that was part of it. But it was a surprise to me. I mean, I just remembered her as an older woman, you know, in her 60s and 70s, and then to read her journals and her letters made me realize she was an incredibly, incredibly remarkable woman.
So I have the microphone over here.
Yes.
We have about 20 future teachers in the room today watching you. Yeah, our freshman foundations class is here. Did she include writings from her experiences teaching? It sounds like she had some incredible, unique teaching experiences. Does she have some specifically from those experiences?
You know, I don't have those. I can't think of those. But she enjoyed teaching. She always considered herself a teacher. That was one of the things that she always did. I believe she graduated with an English degree and a teaching degree. She came here right out of high school, and then I think she got at that time, Dakota Wesleyan had a teacher's college. So it was like a 2-year program to get your teaching certificate. And then she came back and finished up and got her degree. She eventually went on and got her master's, and she also got her PhD during her time back in the States. So she was very much committed to education. She was very much of a feminist at that time. She very strongly was an advocate, and that was very difficult in India at the time, to be an advocate for women in India. And she had a very, very strong personality, and she pushed that a lot.
I think that you find her personality in the yearbooks that we've looked through, and just her descriptions from her classmates of fun and, yeah, just an enjoyable person. Other questions?
Could I just mention a couple of things?
This is my wife.
I'm the wife.
Deb. Her name is Deb.
Amanda, our daughter, went in the Peace Corps as well, right after she graduated from McAllister College in St. Paul, Minnesota. And she served in Russia, and hers was the only Peace Corps group to serve in Russia. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
But I wish they could go more into what a fun personality she was, because she was so curious. And she had an incident where she killed a cobra snake in her bedroom. And as a young boy, Keith at the reunion remembers the snake skin. She brought the snake skin to show them.
She was given the snake skin, yeah.
Huge. And she biked everywhere in India, she learned to ride a bike when she was in India. She played tennis all the time.
She was very competitive on the ships. They would always have competitions.
Yeah,
deck tennis. She was always first to sign up for deck tennis.
Yeah, yeah. She loved her students. They would go on outings all the time, and she did love teaching. She had to learn the language, and that was incredibly difficult when she first went over. But she talks about the first time she heard a radio, the first time she saw an airplane, and then she was determined to fly in an airplane, so she did. And she witnessed Boxer Day. She traveled the world, the whole world 5 times.
Circumvented the world.
And she knew people everywhere she went. So it's really quite a fascinating read if you ever get a chance. Keith really detailed a lot of that.
I kind of described her, or I think of her, kind of in the mode of a Forrest Gump in the first half of the 1900s. If you remember Forrest Gump. That's
Keith, how long did it take you to put this together?
A couple of winters, off and on. I struggled for a long time trying to figure out how to write a story. Because initially I thought, well, I would write it as a biography. But I couldn't write as well as she could. And so then I said, well, I'm just going to write it in her words. And so I'm going to pick out some of her most vivid, exciting, descriptive episodes of her life, and that really kind of characterize what her life was like. I mean, she was a devout Christian. She would wander into Hindu festivals and hand out the Gospel of John to anybody who would take it. She was just fearless about that. So it took me actually a couple of winters before I realized, and then I had to go back and kind of because she was so descriptive. She was such an excellent writer. And then I thought, I can't write as well as she can. And so I let her write the story. And the whole time I was writing, I thought she was looking over my shoulder and saying, this is what you got to say.
Keith, I've read a bit of what you've put together, not the entire thing, but the thing that came to my mind, and we talked a bit about that, was what were her parents thinking? I mean, what were they feeling? Like she went to Chicago and she went to New York with her father.
Her father was not particularly religious, but I think he recognized that Gertrude had a very independent personality, and that they were not going to tie that down. Her sisters stayed in the area, her brothers stayed in the area, but I think both of her parents, and her mother was very supportive. She often wrote to her mother, more so than to her father. Her father just didn't write. She criticized him because he never wrote. But her mother and her older sister communicated quite often. But at that time, it took 6 weeks for a letter to get from India back to Eagan, South Dakota, and then another. And that was one of the hardest times for her, is when her folks died, because she was out in India when they both died, and she did find out within a couple of days after they died, because she had gotten a telegram, but she couldn't go back. It was a 8-week journey to get on a ship and go back to South Dakota. So it was a very sad time for her. But they were supportive of her, particularly her mother.
You have had some contact with our archives.
Yes.
Can you tell us how you used the university archives in your work?
Well, I was able to get some of the photographs from her going back to 1917 and her college years, and some of the things that she was involved in, the Althea Club, which, anybody know what the Althea Club is? It's apparently a women's literary society, and she was involved in that while she was here at Dakota Wesleyan. She was in the band, and those are the things that I found out through the archives and the information that Kitty has sent to me. So those are things that I didn't know about until I got that information.
Any other questions? One more question. Okay.
Have you traveled to India to kind of follow in her footsteps, see if there are people who recognize her?
That's an excellent question. And I haven't. And I've looked at it and I've thought about it, but I have not. And in my autobiography, I've got a map there of all the places that were important to her. One of the things that I was able to track down Henry Babatek, the young boy that she was able to reunite with her mother. He ended up working for the U.S. government in Washington, or outside of Washington. And he was writing at the time, his memoirs of his time in the labor camps in Siberia and how he ended up on the ship. And he's got a whole nother story that is phenomenal. I communicated with him quite a bit. But what I would have really liked to do, and I've tried to figure out how to do this, is there's a good chance that Sam or Shushila's children, could quite possibly still be alive in India. And I thought I would love to go there and bring some of these pictures and some of this correspondence back to them. And I don't know if they would remember her, but they were young children when she was there. But that would be a great adventure for me.
Keith, in conclusion, what do you think Gertrude's advice would be to today's student?
I think she would say, be adventurous, be strong in your beliefs, in your emotions, do what you feel motivated to do, like what she did. Stay true to your faith. I think that's what she would say. Thank you.
Up here are several of her journals and photographs if you'd like to come up, and Keith and his family will be here to visit for a few more minutes. So thank you for coming today. Wow, that was so interesting. I just love it. Well done.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.